Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are back once again with the Economancer, and today's bit of a special guest. We have Sigfried Trent, who is a really, really good friend of mine. I thoroughly enjoy all of his work. I'm going to let him discuss that with you. So please, Sigfried, take it away.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sigfried Trent. We kind of know each other from a debate channel that used to be around. We had a lot of fun arguing. I do like to argue. My day job these days, I'm a game designer and writer. I work for Evil Genius Games, making something called Everyday Heroes. That's occupied most of my time, but I love to keep track of people who are doing deep thoughts. I do have a bachelor's degree in economics, but I'm not really an academic. I don't study the academic literature in economics, but I am familiar with some of the concepts. So that's me.
Awesome, awesome. So, you brought up debate. So I'm assuming debate is something very fun. This is probably not going to land in the field of debate.
Yeah,
We would definitely like to have a discussion on this topic, which, this is, to me, like I said, this is an important topic. I came across this through some, uh, trying to square some circles on some philosophy I was working on at the time in public policy and how, like, why is public policy so difficult for people to understand when it comes to there's like this broad generalized like top down effort to get people to do stuff, but and then we see in reality like it very rarely works like that. And that's where I came across role theory and the way it played out for me. Looking at social media and role theory, I thought was unbelievably fascinating, from like a systems perspective, where you're thinking about like isomorphism and some of these words where basically everybody becomes the same. And so, and also Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton are two pretty big influences on most of my work since I became an adult. So anyway, so you had some really, really great comments, and I figured we could discuss that as well as your thoughts on roles and what role you play in life.
sure. Yeah, well, I guess I can start with that. So I guess I grew up with my father, like reading me Lord of the Rings and fantasy stories and things like that. And somewhere along the way, I kind of internalized the idea that I want to be like the hero of a story. And so I guess when I go around in life, not all the time, of course, but a lot of the time, I'm kind of trying to play that role. So I'm trying to be a heroic character, meaning helping people out, doing good things, being sort of morally justified, having ideals that I pursue, and having a good sense of character, right? So if I promise you something, then I'll definitely do that. You might just call it kind of a version of virtue ethics or something, but I do think it is me playing a role, like a role that I identified as a kid that I liked and that I wanted to become. And I think a lot of us do that as kids. I will say what's a little different is you were talking a lot about how someone plays a role with their family, and then on another occasion they play a different role at work, and they play maybe a different role with their friends out at the bar or in another situation, and a different role online. We can have a lot of different roles. I would say, like, I bring this hero role that I try to play into every social sphere I go into. And I kind of bring myself in there. Now, I do adapt. You think of a hero as a guy who's flashy and he's standing in front. And I had to learn over the years that, like, yeah, there's situations that are not about me. So I have to sit down and be quiet and listen. There are times when I suppress that. But if I'm directly interacting with someone or I'm an active agent in a social situation, that's often the role I'm trying to play by default. I'll shift because sometimes, like, people need support or they need some other things. And I guess as the hero, you have to adapt, right? And try to be there for folks. So it's a little different for me because you were talking about intersectionality, and the title of the video had to do with Jordan Peterson, which you didn't talk about a lot in the video, but I assume this is because of situation he's in with the Canadian Psychology Board or something. I tried to do a little research, but there wasn't a lot of info. Where basically his social media activities had gotten him in trouble with a professional organization, and so he's playing two roles there as as a I don't know actually exactly what he does, whether he's a clinical psychologist or just a professor of psychology. But he is in some hot water with his professional group because of things he was doing outside of that, right? So yeah, so I try to have an attitude where I'm me. I'm Siegfried Trent all the time. Like I don't really have much of an alias online, and I try to kind of carry that into every sphere I'm in. But it does make me a little unusual when I'm at work. I'm still me, and I don't play the role of the dutiful employee or the whatever terribly well. Like if I talk to my boss, I talk to them on an equal level because I'm me and they're them. And we have a role at work, and I follow orders, but I don't treat them like my master or something, and that throws some people off because they're used to people. If somebody's at work and they're the new guy, they're subservient. I'm the new guy. I'm just me, uh, new or not. So, it depends. I don't compartmentalize much.
Yeah, no, I mean that's really cool. I'm glad you brought that up because this is something that's it's probably really important. And how I'm trying to frame this as I don't sound like I'm attacking postmodernism just to attack postmodernism because it's not meant to be that way. But we all have this idea of like the meta narrative, right? And one of the fundamental parts of postmodernism is an attack on meta narratives. But along with that, we also have like a meta role, and that's kind of our relationship to the system kind of thing. So you're talking about your meta role, such as like being a hero, right? So I think that's a really really important part for the domain of how people live and exist within their social system or their social subsystem, whatever you want to call it. So you could have someone, right? So someone's your boss at work. They still may defer to you for whatever reason because uh you have that hero meta role that kind of they're gonna fall under. And I think that's really important to think about this role theory is that meta role, because surprisingly enough, one of the things that brought me into role theory on top of what I was talking about with Talcott Parsons was the role of the patient. And people to this day don't understand that, like, when you go to the hospital, like, you start playing a role, and sometimes this role becomes so powerful to a person that it actually overwhelms their entire personality domain, right? This is people like you could think of like Munchausen syndrome or even Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This is a function of that role of being like sick and someone's trying to take care of you and you just give in, right? And so there's like this meta role, and I I hate to say that it's something like an alpha, beta, sigma, because I hate those memes, but there's some realism to it if you think that, I play a role, that meta role, and that how that meta role interacts with other people is
Yeah.
really important. And to really quickly touch on the Jordan Peterson part is one, I really didn't want to beat on that because I seen that everybody else was doing that, but I wanted to take that moment to just open up a discussion on role theory because again it's something that came from the 1960s. We have this modern idea that especially in economics, right, like don't read economic literature that's more than 20 years old, don't read sociology literature that's more than 20 years old. And the problem with that is there's a lot of brilliant ideas out there from these old folks, and we've got a lot to learn. There's probably Dosey, who's a famous economist, him in the 70s and 80s, went back and read like a really weird paper from Joseph Schumpeter, and he's probably going to get a Nobel Prize just reworking Schumpeter's work in the modern day. So it's kind of important to go back and look at that, especially with role theory and the information age. So
Yeah.
yeah, so my role, you're talking about that. When I was a kid, I always wanted to grow up and be in the military. And then I grew up and I became a soldier, and I was there for 11 years. And then I was like, yeah, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't nearly as cool as being a soldier out in my backyard, like throwing hand grenades. It's
Yeah.
definitely not the same. So do you think, that meta role of like being a hero? Because I guess soldiers like quasi in there, but there's more like a submission
It's a
kind of
little
make.
different. There's some
Yeah,
similarities, right? You're
yeah,
fighting for other people.
right.
But I think the difference is whether you're kind of independently guided. You're following your own star or you're following, the team.
Yeah, yeah. So, do you think, like with me, after I've completed that, I realized that I'm way more independent than I want the military. Do you think that as you've now kind of grown older into that meta role, do you think that that is? I don't want to say, do you like regret it, but are there times where you're like, I kind of wish I wasn't that way, or kind of wish I didn't go down that route?
No, not really. Like I take a lot of pride from it, and you mentioned I have a little story about this that there was kind of like an epic life moment, right? So I had leukemia a couple of years ago, and so I spent about a year in treatment for that, and I got to play the role of a patient quite a bit, which I'm not great at. Uh, as my wife can attest to you. I don't usually get taken care of by people. I'm very grateful for all the people who did, and I certainly was. I would try to be a very grateful and kind patient. But there were times when I'm like, no, I'm in charge of certain aspects of my health, and other people don't get to tell me what to do, right? And that was a little difficult for everybody. So I think when you have your meta role and you play it too strongly or too often, sometimes you do damage to people because you're not fitting into the roles that are expected of you, and that makes it hard for everybody else to know what their role is and how they can carry out their duties right in that role and achieve their satisfaction in that role. And that's something I've had to learn how to temper over the years. That you can't just you do have to fit into some roles sometimes for other people's sake, and a good hero knows how to help other people be their best life, right? Maybe so that's sort of a lesson I had to learn. But also during this time, of course, when you're really sick and the survival rates on this leukemia are not good. So a lot of people reached out to me and they were really sweet and wonderful. And one person was an old high school friend, and he reached out to me and he just wanted to say, like, you're really inspiring to me. I always looked up to you and all the things you're doing and just following your life, and really made me feel great. And I just wanted to say that. And I was like, oh, wow, that for a guy who's trying to play the hero role all his life, to have somebody say, hey, I see you as a hero, and you're kind of a hero to me, I was, incredibly touched, right? It's just like complete validation, you might say. And so, yeah, that whole period was really moving for me because, and he wasn't the only guy or the only person who reached out to me in that way. And so, yeah, it makes when you get validated in the role you choose to play, I think it kind of makes life worth living. So I do think roles are incredibly powerful and meaningful in our lives and worth thinking about. And it's definitely worth thinking about how technology and society either make that easier or harder for us, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, one of the things I feel like I might catch criticism off of that I may have kind of put too much of the emphasis, I guess, on like the left and cancel culture kind of thing. And one, I tried to make it clear that the isomorphism isn't singular, that it is kind of it's a part of this divergence of reality, I guess you could say, in modern America, where we have people becoming far right or far left, and they're not there's very little middle ground that's happening. And I guess to me that's a big problem when it comes to this role theory stuff, because back in the day, and I mean you'd made a kind of a statement on this, but back in the day, yes, your personal life could affect your business life and could affect your other organizational structures, but for the most part you were pretty insulated from stuff, right? So if you were stressed out at work because of your boss, when you went and did something, I don't know, like goofing off at a bar, uh, 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 quote unquote, taking a selfie, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal, because it's just going to be between you, that person, and maybe some other person that you show the picture to. So it's not really going to be as effective against your life. And then also, you really didn't have to worry so much about what you said. Now, there's positives and there's negatives associated with this, right? And I tried to bring that out. Like, yeah, with the more information, there's more transparency. You know what people are going to be thinking because they're going to tell you. And there's consequences when you think something that's like abhorrent or like beyond the pale, right? But when things become so decentered and so pushed off to the margins, then what would be perfectly reasonable position is now something that's like that's not reasonable at all, and that goes for the left and for the right, right? there's
Yeah,
there's people, you say something like I'm pro union, there's people on the right like they're done, they're ready to fight, it's over, right?
yeah,
And you've got people on the right, it's like I'm pro free market, and they're like, oh, you just want to feed the system, you're racist, sexist, whatever. Like,
yeah.
there's nothing that maintains the center now, and I think a lot of that has to do with the roles that we play being slammed together, so you're not insulated from it as much.
I think it has partly to do with it. I think when it comes to technology, there are a lot of misconceptions because we follow our instincts a lot as human beings, right? I mean, it makes sense. It's just our first, your emotional reaction is a lot faster than your intellectual reaction. I know that is the case for me. So,
Yeah.
like, when I face criticism, because I have to face criticism in my job, I put stuff out there publicly as a creator, and I really want people to critique it. But your first reaction is always emotional, right? Like, oh, right, it said something bad. But then I have to stop and go, yeah, but I could learn from that. Like, they may be right, they may be wrong, but if I think about it, I might learn something to do better, right? So we always have that quick thing, and this is the same with technology. So we always had consequences. You could go out to the bar and you could insult the boss's wife, and somebody could hear it who knows the boss that you didn't know they knew the boss. They tell the boss and you get fired, right? Like, we've always had it. We've always had rumor mills. We've always had social, networks and things like that in the real space, right? Meat space, but it's slower. It's safer, right? It's different, and it's the scale is totally different. I think when we go online, we react to it in different ways. Some people like social media is just a platform for advertising. I use it that way sometimes.
Yep.
In other cases, we feel like it's our living room and we're just hanging out and chatting. It feels private, even though hundreds of people can read what we post if we're not careful about how we choose to post it. Like, people, I don't know how many, but a lot of people don't know. There's different privacy levels and all this kind of thing. Plus, even if you are private, somebody could take that private message and make it public, right? There's a record of it whenever you're dealing with electronics, always, right? So even the most encrypted, the most private communication you could possibly make, somebody could take a screenshot and put it on Twitter, right, for the whole world to see. So it's different, and we don't think about that, and we get relaxed, and we want to get relaxed online, right? We want to use it as a way to kind of blow off steam and chill and feel comfortable and feel chummy, and that's in many ways when it feels best, right? But it's not your living room, right? It is a different beast. It is a public, open forum. It's like standing on the White House lawn with 100,000 people there telling them what's going on. But it doesn't feel that way to us. We don't see those people, right?
Yeah.
So I think the thing is, our instinct often betrays the reality, and we end up behaving in a way that if we thought about it carefully, we might not have done it. Um, but we want to be relaxed online. We want to, like I do, I live online. Like, I am an internet creature, and I have been since there was an internet, more or less. I used to do BBSs before there was internet. You dial in with your phone, a little community of people and stuff, and then there was Usenet, and so I just grew up with that, and I love it. I swim in it. I live it, right? And I'm very public about everything. I've got a blog. You can read all my stuff. You could go on all my. I have tons of social media things. But I think when you wander into it, because now everybody's in there, right? In the last 20 years, but they don't really understand it exactly what it really is. And
No.
so I think we react in a way that's an issue.
Yeah.
Like, now, like Peterson, I think is a lot more deliberate, right? Like, he's a guy, he knows he's in this professional organization. He's had this online business persona engagement that's ramped up. And so he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, because those two cultures are very different. The culture of his fans and the culture of the academia of the organization he belongs to, there's a huge gulf, right, between those two. And I do think they've been forced together in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, by his choice, right? And I think he's aware, but I think a lot of other people get caught totally unaware. They just don't get what they're doing, and when it turns back around, it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And I feel bad for some people. You know, you're like, why did that guy put his penis on the internet, right? And I think, yeah, that was a bad move, pal. Like you just, even if you send it privately to somebody, like I said, there's an
yeah,
artifact of it that could become public at any moment. So just don't do that, right? But it's
right,
hard
right.
because that's how people want to interact. You know, they want to have sexual contact in a way through the internet, right? But oh man, like
Yeah,
you're taking a big risk
anathema.
if you don't want that to be public. Now, if you're
Yeah,
like, hey, yeah, it's my penis, I don't care. You can take a look at it, whatever. Then fine, right? You know, go for it. If you don't, if you're okay with whatever the blowback is,
yeah,
then that
yeah.
doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, don't do that, folks.
Yeah. I recommend against. I personally have never put my penis in digital form anywhere.
Yeah,
You
no.
know, but
No, that's anathema. But so some things to put out there. So you were talking about putting out your work and having people respond to it. I remember when I first started writing, especially trying to push towards publishing, and I remember before I would send it to a desk review or something like that and letting an editor get a hold of it. I always made sure that I waited 24 to 48 hours after I wrote something. Because if you just said, "Oh, I just finished it," and you send it off to that editor and you get it back, or you sit down with someone and edit it, you're going to be so frustrated and so angry because they're going to look at you and go, why did you put that sentence doesn't make any sense." You're like, "No, you don't understand. This sentence is so important. How dare you?" So for anybody out there watching, take your time when you're writing before you turn it into editing. Sleep on it, okay? Sleep on it. There's also another reason why when you do send something off to editing, you're probably not going to receive anything back for 6 months. Like if you're going to send it to review at a journal, they're not going to touch it for 6 months because they don't want you to, fire back angrily. So I have an example here that I think is really important to this role theory kind of idea in modern day. That's not Jordan Peterson, that I think is as important. So I'm sure you're familiar with G4 TV and Adam Sessler, right?
a little. Yeah, I know who they are. Yeah.
Okay. So I grew up, I watched X Play, right? I loved X Play. I'm that generation of age, right? And I really like, I won't say I looked up to him, but I really enjoyed his content. I really liked who he was on X Play. And then they restarted G4 TV and it was awful. And then because it was him running it for the most part, him and a few others. And I am obviously conservative. I am biased towards conservatism. There's no shine
Sure.
on it there. And they were pushing a lot of left-wing stuff in games, and especially in spheres of games like that has traditionally been very right-wing. Like Games Workshop, Warhammer 40K has been traditionally right-wing. I mean, the story is based on like Catholicism, right? So there's a strong, and then you've got Adam Sessler, who's just obnoxiously left wing, right? And growing up, I didn't know that. I was so separated from him as a person than his
Hmm.
role as Adam Sessler on X Play. And then now you've got G4 TV where he's no longer separated from his role as Adam Sessler on G4 TV, and then Adam Sessler, left wing activist, Adam Sessler, AI entrepreneur, So it's all conglomerated into one. And so he's no longer caring about his fans. I mean, his tag now is Adam Gamers Are Stupid Sessler. So
Jeez. Oh my god.
so that's
Yeah.
that's kind of what I mean by like the roles are kind of being slammed together in this most awkward way. Because as a kid, I didn't know that, but now if I was the same age like now, and I would be looking up to Adam Sessler, I would also be inundated with Adam Sessler telling me I'm a fat slop, and I'm just like, that's rude. But yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting, like as an entertainer, right? And that's something that's big in the culture right now, right? As an entertainer, are you your persona or are you you? And you know, you see both. Like on Twitch, the culture is very much most of the time that you're you. You know, you want genuine. You want people who feel real, right? Who are really what you see, and you have a relationship with them as an entertainer, and it's kind of a personal one. But on the other hand, there are entertainers who put on a face and they have a persona and a character, something like Doctor Disrespect or something like famous one, right? And they're a character, and that's not who they really are, right? But then you want to. Some people form a relationship with the character, right? It gets even weirder, right? Where you're like, oh yeah, or like wrestlers all the time. Like wrestlers play characters.
Yes.
People form a relationship with the character, and sometimes the wrestler and the character are kind of the same. It's just an exaggerated version, but sometimes they're totally different. I think that's always been an entertainment, but it's even more so now because we know so much more about people. It's so hard not to know about them. And so many people are so eager. I mean, we always had like the dirt sheets and stuff. We did that with top celebrities, but now it can be anybody. There's so much information about everybody if you put yourself out there. I don't know. It's it's a difficult world for a very private person. Like, people who are very private, I suggest minimize your internet contact or just be a reader, right? And don't be a poster. But I'm a very non-private person, so it's fine for me. And I'm, and like I said, like if I'm playing a character, you kind of know I'm playing a character. And if I'm being me, most of the time I'm just me. But I do have, I forget what the word is. Maybe you remember when it's not talking in code. It's coded language. There we go. Coded language. I do use coded language a lot when I'm like right now. I'm projecting my voice and try to keep my eyes open so I look good on camera and I sound like somebody who's authoritative and intelligent. If I were at home, really chilling with my friends, I'd kind of be slouching and my voice would get kind of more mumbly, right?
Is that a shot at me?
No, that's just me. I'm just saying, like, as a performer, because I do acting and I used to do acting and stuff, so I'm self-conscious as a performer, and so I try to have a little bit of a persona when I'm on camera, right? But I will occasionally forget if I get really into a long conversation, and I'll get kind of slouchy and I'll get more mumbly, and I'm like, I kind of didn't want to do that, but that is who I am, right? I'm a very relaxed person.
No, I'm with you.
I'm relaxed, but I get excited. Yeah. Anyway, so I think it's a really interesting intersection, and both for a performer, you have to decide what you want, and as a fan, you have to decide what you want. For me, being self-aware is always the first step. Self-aware what you're doing. Am I trying to form a relationship with this person as a fan? As not a fan? Am I interested in their character? Am I interested in who they really are? Asking yourself these questions is a good step to being more at peace with whatever it is you're doing. And if you don't ask yourself these questions and you don't even know those questions exist, you get yourself into a very difficult situation that's very emotionally painful.
Yeah, no. So two things that you brought up. One, wrestling. I think that's the best way to think about it. So I actually come from a background of wrestlers. I am one of the few on the East Coast who's a shooter level certified catch wrestler.
Cool.
And my school of training comes from Billy Wicks. So he was a famous wrestler on the East Coast. He was also a bodyguard for Elvis Presley. And, he taught my coach who teaches me. It's really awesome. And, he had some very, very famous bouts with an individual named Sputnik Monroe. And they had to really, really, to maintain kayfabe, really dig into their characters. I mean, guys named Sputnik Monroe, this is at the height of, the Cold War. He caught heat, like real heat. Like people don't understand these days how much heat wrestlers took back in the 70s and maybe in the early 80s. Like this is before it became over fashionable, right? Like the last time that it became real heat was the Attitude Era. That with DX and stuff like that, that was real heat. There were people that were really going to try to hurt, Triple H, Shawn Michaels. There were people that really loved, I mean, like idolized Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I'm not going to say that I'm one of them, but I was one of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that level of kayfabe, it's almost impossible now. And there's a lot of wrestlers that are like heels that they get in trouble on Twitter because they're playing that part, and they're like, "Why are you? No, you don't understand. This is stop."
Yeah, they get trouble for being too nice or being too mean, right? It's a hard line to walk.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I think it's pretty cool. And another thing he was talking about is this idea of parasocial bonding, right? So, like looking at someone famous and being like, oh, I'm like your best friend, but I'm not best friends with that person. I'm best friends with that character. And
Yeah.
parasocial bond, we have zero clue on how to deal with parasocial bonding. The best we can think of is that back in the day, people would pretend to be Achilles or something like that, but even then it wasn't to the level that we have now, where we get to we face see someone all the time and we build this relationship with them. It's super crazy. And the
Yeah.
last thing, I also did acting. I acted a lot. I was in Glee, and then my voice broke and then I couldn't sing anymore. And so yeah, no, I always try to maintain like a relaxed kind of chill state, because I feel if I get too uppity, I end up turning into like a Milo Yiannopoulos, because that ended
Yeah, you
up
don't want
happening to me. Yeah,
that.
dude, there's some of the old debates you could go back and watch where I was trying to figure out like my proper diagram for debating, where some of them were more boisterous and I was more animated and stuff. And then there was others where I was just like, this is how we're going to do it. And I had to try to figure out where I landed, because it's a lot easier like in a live setting. But
Yeah.
when you're on the computer and you're doing this debate, you don't get to feel as much energy. So you got to create the energy. And so I just don't do anything. I'm just lazy and fat now. So whatever. Yeah. So the Adam Sessler, that's where I was going
Yeah.
with the whole thing is, I how does society deal with this, rather than just saying like, you have to, because there's a question about, because of the isomorphism of the two sides just derailing away, and that the middle position is getting to the point where, look, if you're right of Marx, you're a dirty fascist. If you're left of Ronald Reagan, you're a dirty commie, right? And so everything that you say that's somewhere in the middle is now bad. So
Yeah.
that's really my big problem with it. It's not so much that roles are becoming isomorphic, is that roles are becoming isomorphic on top of the nonsense as everything just splits apart. I guess, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's tough. I mean, like for my part, what I try to do is I'm a liberal minded person, right? Like it's just in my DNA. And when we're talking conservative and liberal in the very elemental side, like conservative is to preserve what you have, to honor tradition, that kind of thing, right? And liberal is to kind of be wildly creative, to invent new things, to always be trying something else, right? I fall in the more liberal camp. And I
Yeah.
do think those two very core ideas lead to not all, but many of the branches of what we call political liberalism and conservatism. They cross over in a bunch of places too, but
Yeah.
there's those roots there. And so I'm intrinsically kind of liberal. I'm always attracted and interested in new things that are changing and really dynamic, right? And however, I respect conservative. I mean, you can't be doing everything crazy. Like it's chaos, and I don't like pure chaos. Right? I kind of like in the middle somewhere, changes, but feel safe, right?
Yeah.
So I try to just be compassionate to people who are on the other side, so long as they are receptive to that. Like if somebody comes at me with the flamethrower, I come back with the flamethrower, and I enjoy it a little bit, right? I like a good fight, so I like debate. But I don't want to. I don't want it to be personal, and I prefer that we can kind of come back and just really mix and engage, right? So I try to reach out and be compassionate to people who are strangers that I meet in political discussion, or even friends who I feel like are drifting towards radicalism somewhere. And since I'm more liberal minded, I have a little more sensitive to conservative drift, right? So somebody will post something and I'll try to have a nice commentary on it that doesn't say that's stupid, you're an idiot, but just to say, hey, there's another perspective, or I think the video isn't considering this truth or this, so try to be compassionate and nice about it, right?
Yeah.
And like a friend of mine dubbed me the idiot whisperer, right? Because it's where somebody else would go, "You're an idiot." I'll be like, "Hey, let's talk about this." Da da da. And my goal isn't to like change people's minds, but to soften them a little bit, right? To get them to go, "Okay, well, maybe there's two sides, right?" Yeah, okay. There's some other things to consider. So that's my personal part, and if more people could do that, we'd be better off, right? It's hard though. I see people attacking being a moderate. I see that more on the left than the right. I see the left a lot attack people for being moderates, right? And to me, like that pains me, and so I defend being a moderate. And then they have this line, they're like, well, there's no halfway between Hitler and humanity, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's not what being a moderate's about. It's not about compromising with Hitler. It's just about compromising between a more moderate set of views, right? It's about not going all the way, right? Like taking it a step at a time. A little incrementalism is good for your
Ooh,
soul,
anathema, anathema. How
yeah,
dare you care about? I'm in
yeah.
public policy, and you say incrementalism in my work. Oh my God. No, you don't
Yeah,
understand. We need a revolution. No, no, we really don't.
yeah,
You don't want a revolution. Please stop. And I've had that debate hundreds of times. Stop it.
yeah.
And it's fascinating. So being the idiot whisperer and having this idea of compassion, I mean, we've got famous philosophers that drive a lot of our thought, and one of them just so happens to be Nietzsche, who thought compassion was the biggest idiocy of humanity. It was like the main part of his Antichrist book, and what was that other one? The genealogy of morals was basically just looking at compassion and saying it's evil, it's stupid, stop doing it. And you've actually got a good amount of people that legitimately think that you have to will to power, and this is both on the left and the
Yeah,
right, that compassion is just anathema, right? So I mean,
yeah,
personally, as an Orthodox Christian, I mean, compassion is the duty. I've gone through all different types of engagement styles, and none of them have seemed to work. So at the end of the day, I've just come to the
it's tough. I
conclusion,
mean,
yeah, you just have
people,
to love them.
right? Yeah, you have to kind of, or on social media, I block people. I do shut stuff down if I just don't want to listen to it. Like lately, for some reason, Facebook thinks I really want to see like vegan memes, right? And anti-vegan memes. I don't know why, because I don't care. Be vegan, don't be vegan. Doesn't matter to me. I'm not, but I also don't have. I have sympathy for both, but I don't want to see them like make nasty memes about each other. Some of them are occasionally funny. I'll just say I find the anti-vegan memes a little funnier, but I really don't want to see any of them, right? And I keep
Yeah.
telling Facebook no, and Facebook's like, oh, obviously you're stopping to look at these, so you must love them. No, stop. Um, but so I'll just if somebody won't shut up, I'll shut them down. I did have a little trouble. I have a cousin who, got just really wouldn't stop with some of the more aggressive meme stuff, and I called him out on some things, and he couldn't handle it, and so we had to get blocked, right? So if you
Yeah.
can't handle the discussion, if it's causing you too much mental distress, don't do it. Like
Yeah.
one of my sayings is like, like the life's too short to spend it all the time trying to do great things, right? Like you can't. We're none of us individually. We can all have an influence on the world. We can all have an influence, but we
Yeah.
can't all have control, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes for your own mental health, you just have to let some stuff go, right? And
Yeah.
and not try to fix it. Just focus on what you can have an impact on, and that's plenty, right? Like if you're moving in the right direction and you're influencing even a few people, it makes a big difference. Like it's hard to
Oh,
feel it,
yeah.
right? But it's out there for sure.
Well, that's what led me to really start this channel because, being on Facebook, I was one of those people. I was always on Facebook in the arguments. I mean, obviously, I was a part of Call Out doing the debates. And now with Call Out, I didn't try to push as much my opinion as I did just in general, just to debate and just, hear different ideas and defend different ideas, so on and so
Yeah,
forth. But when Facebook, when I was heavy into this Facebook debate stuff, which led me into Call Out, it was mentally stressful. And even now, I can tell, and even my wife can tell now, where if I am too deep in a philosophical argument, or I'm too deep in a Discord group, or too deep in a Facebook, which I don't even use Facebook anymore other than to promote this. But if I get too deep in it, I mean, it causes mental stress on my life that I have to just honestly back away. And it's one of the
Yeah.
things that's kept me away from Facebook, because I love to argue. You want to do it, let's do it. It don't matter who you are, where you are, let's go. I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
But I have to worry about like my academic career. I have to worry about all the other stuff, my family. And if I'm putting too much time in arguing with people online, that's not helpful. And
Yeah.
it's not healthy either, right? Like, you can't just live in the fight. You gotta, even in the army, you're gonna get to go on leave after so long, because so you're not inundated in that fight for too much. And I think that's also a part of the problem of roles, because some people, once, and I'm trying to, if it's not clear, I'm just trying to make sure I wrap it back in. All right, there's threads out there, but to wrap it back in, I'm not very
Yeah.
good at this. So you just
That's good.
just live with it. Just live with it. All right. So we've got these roles, and some people really can't get away from the role that they don't want to deal with, right? So I mean, if again, I have a job, and if my job was to watch some of my videos, I don't think I would get in any trouble. But the fact that there is something there that could be taken is stressful. It's really hard on the mental health. And
Yeah.
so sometimes if I have like a hot take, it's like, I'm not going to touch that, because then I feel like, even though I'm justified in my thought, I can't really do it, just by the happen chance someone sees it and I get in trouble. And so that's like a level of censorship that I don't think modern humans have really, and I shouldn't say censorship, because it's not the same, but I mean, I guess you could say in
It's
some
self
senses
censorship, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like a malignant tumor. Uh because it's there, and I need to get rid of it, but at the same time, I'm scared to go to the doctor. So,
Yeah, we do have that problem. Like, what's our catharsis? What's our outlet, right? And how can we? Because we need that, right, for sure. And how can we have it and not embarrass ourselves or go too far? But at the same time, we have to kind of like when I see people, oh, so and so said that. I try to look at it and look at the context because I'm interested in social value judgments, right? Did he do the right thing or did he not do the right thing? Did he say something horrible? Did he not? And I try to look at it and try to make a judgment about like somebody blown off steam, or are they kind of irredeemable in this way. But then again, you go, well, maybe they're just sort of boiling cauldron of hate and this is just the tip of the iceberg. You don't know. It's really tough to judge. I try not to judge other people online, but at the same time, I'm always interested in moral dilemmas, so I look at these a lot. I often, however, do not post my opinion as to whether someone should be judged or not, except to maybe defend if I think something's a little unfair and somebody's going crazy on somebody else and they need a little defending, then I do that. But
yeah.
I don't know. That's a hard one, and I'm not sure I figured that one out either. Right? Like, how hard do we have to hold somebody responsible for what they did? I think a lot of it comes down to kind of how you behave when you're called out. If you get really defensive, that's going to be harder for you than if you're like, hey, yeah, like it was. I don't really feel this way, but it was a moment of anger, and so I said it, and I regret it, and then that's
Yeah.
probably your best move most of the time, right? You're like, yeah, I lost my cool, as you do, and said some things I regret saying. That's that,
Uh,
you know.
So that's interesting. That's interesting, because that's the opposite of what everyone on the right would tell you. Everyone on the right would tell you, if you feel justified in it, just roll with it. Because if you apologize, all they're going to do is just take that apology as an admission of guilt. When you could have something that you're fully, what you feel to be fully justified in your opinion, and then you're just going to, I said it and now I regret
Totally.
it.
Yeah.
Right, but do do you actually? And if you don't actually, then you're kind of like turning on your own self. And again, this could be something as simple as like
Yeah.
someone says, I'm against gay marriage, right? Like, okay, that is one of those things that could easily be taken and that's a career ender for some people, for many people, to be honest.
Yeah. What do you
Um,
do if you have a really unpopular opinion? Like,
Well, I don't know. I
it's
don't know if
tough,
it's unpopular. I don't know if ending gay marriage is an unpopular opinion. I
I think
think
it's
it's
unpopular. I mean, if you just do a general poll, you're going to find that people support the right of people to get married now. It wasn't that way when I was young, right? But I think it is that way now.
I
You'll
would
find
say
more people to support
50-50.
them though. Oh, I think it's more than that.
I
I think if you want to go 50-50, you're looking more like abortion. Like that's a real down the middle
I don't know
issue.
about. I think abortion 60-40, and I think gay marriage is 50-50. Because even when it
I don't think
passed,
so.
it wasn't pop. Even when the Supreme Court did that, it had lost numerous general elections. I think it was like 2 years prior. It had lost in like a general election. Something along those lines, but it's a part of, and so this is the thing: the Supreme Court will always forecast what they expect will be. They can look at trends and go, okay, at this point in time, the boomers are really against it. They're the largest generation. Generation Z isn't voting yet. So we're going to
Yeah.
know that millennials are somewhere around here. So in the next 10 years, it's going to be more popular. But at the same time, I also think that there's a growing resentment on the right, where it used to be, most people on the right were ambivalent. I think there's a growing resentment in the right wing against it, and the same with abortion. I think that's why the Supreme Court made the decision, because people think that the Supreme Court, that it's a Republicans or it's the conservatives and the liberals. That it was a pretty tied court when gay marriage was passed, but they saw in the future what was expected. They had the expectation of what the trends were going to look like. And with Roe v. Wade, overturning of Roe v. Wade, they saw what the projected trends were looking like. And so they took that into account. And that's why I say that there's a huge shift, right? So like Generation Z is probably the number one. Look at this. You're either super based Chad Gen Z, or you're super snowflake Gen Z. Like there's no middle ground. Like
You
I
think they're
don't
really
know.
polarized? Yeah, I don't know a lot of
Yeah.
Gen Zers, so I'm not sure. But
I,
yeah, I don't
I'm
have a personal
sure.
take, but I believe
Yeah.
that's certainly possible. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, like I don't like polarization much. I try to encourage. Well, here's the thing: tying it back into the roles, or tie it back in. I think
Nice.
there's a role I'm really bad at, and that's like a fan or a cheerleader.
Yeah.
Right? Sig don't do that. Like I always have my opinion. This is what I think. Right?
Yeah.
That's most important. And so I'm very much not a like a we, and like this is what we all think. And so I've always been like, well, I have this opinion, it's conservative. I have this opinion, it's liberal. That's because they're my opinions, right? And I'll team up with whoever's gotten the most things in alignment. But I'm never like, if I disagree with it, I disagree with it. I don't care what team I'm on, right?
Yeah.
But there are people who are team players. Like my
Mm-hmm.
team is always the best team, whether it's be sports or politics or whatever. That's a role people play, and they are loyal, right? Loyalty. And if my leader changes what he's saying, well, then that's the right thing, right? I don't care what he said last week. What he's saying now, that's the God's honest truth. That thing he said last week, that's a lie, right? No, he didn't say that. I got a tape right here. That's made up, right? Like they just have to be in alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those people horrify me a little bit, right? Because they can do anything. You don't know what they'll do. Um, like I trust people who have their own principles more, right? Because they'll probably follow these principles. So I don't know. So that scares me, and it's a mindset I don't understand very well, but it's a common one, right? There's a lot of people out there that are good fans, and I just tell them to be careful. I don't
Yeah.
know, but it's part of the polarization, right? And leaders want fans. You want people to like get in there.
Yeah. So there's something interesting about that, right? So you were talking about like this individualistic kind of stick to your morals and principles kind of thing, which I think is beautiful. I think it's the way that the West has kind of maintained itself. But if you look at some of the work done by like Jonathan Haidt, right? Like that's a rather rare thing in the global context, right? Most
Probably
people
is.
most people are a collective identity. Most people will be on role team player, right? It's only the weird kids, Western educated, industrial, whatever. Yeah,
Eh,
duh. I can't. Democratic. That's what it is.
I guess so.
Uh,
Yeah.
they're the only people that really maintain that. As I should say, as a large group. There's
As a large group,
probably
you're right. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to generalize that, right? Yeah. Like I spent time in Japan, which you would say is one of the most collective societies,
Mhm.
not maybe the most, right, but high up there in many respects of the westernized kind of places. Because Japan is a very Western country, despite it, it's got two sides, I guess, but like it's got a lot of West in it. Um,
Yeah.
and there's some very individualized people there, but yeah, like the culture, the overall culture doesn't like that very much, right?
Mhm.
That's the problem. Gets in the way of the way things work. But the people there have it the same. It's just how comfortable they feel. As where in the West, I think there's a whole bunch of followers in the West. Like I think still the majority of people are fans or kind of want that security, right? Um, but the culture, I don't know, has a dimorphism of that because it really venerates kind of individual heroes and leaders and things, right? So I don't know, like I think the people are kind of the same, but yeah, just the way things drift changes because of whatever unique circumstance, and it builds on itself. I don't know. That's my feeling about it, but
No, you're right. I'm right there with you. I mean, some of the studies that I did on inequality and stuff. One of the things was is like Americans. It was like Americans don't understand inequality, right? And they would ask questions about like inequality, and you would have a conservative such as myself, and they would ask a question on what about welfare, right? The expectations, I'm to be against welfare, and I'm like, no, I want to increase welfare. And they're like, what, why? And it's because yeah, for XYZ. And they're like, well, what do you think about inequality? I think inequality is a fantastically good thing. And they're like, that doesn't make it, you can't have those two things at the same time.
right, yeah, because we're all sold this kind of package of goods, like a package
uh,
of ideas, and they all have to go together. But they
right.
don't really, right? Yeah, like yeah,
I- in one of the papers, I got so mad in one of the papers and in one of the books that I'm going through, especially on political inequality, which is a set of videos I'm going to be starting on my work from corruption and special interest groups. They were like Americans and inequality. They don't understand it. They don't make rational choices on it. They don't, they have their own ideas, and but they don't fit neatly into any of the true philosophical understandings of distributive justice. And I was like, why would you ask a plumber his ideas on distributive justice as if he's like, oh yeah, I read Rawls last week,
yeah.
the veil. Like, what is wrong with you? And
Yeah.
and they're like, we're not elite. Like the whole book is like the elites are bad. Then like you're an elitist jerk because you're telling plumbers like you're stupid plumber. Why do you not think better? So,
Yeah. Or, in American politics, I mean, this is something kind of connected, not connected to our topic, but to our interests. Um, Not many people study philosophy at all. And so, and academia is its own thing. You're involved in academia. I'm not, but I read academia a bit. People's misunderstanding. So academic terms that get taken into the popular vernacular and get turned into a weird monster, right? That, yeah, it has connections to the academic term and what's being discussed in academia, but it's taken on its own weird pop culture monster and it becomes the dominant thing. Terms like woke or, social justice or privilege or all these, especially these left ones, right? Like, and I'm usually interested in what the academic topic was, and then I look at what the popular understanding is, and I'm like, oh man, there's just this huge gulf here. I don't know what we can do with that because and both are true in a sense. Like the person who's using the word in a popular sense, they mean the word in that sense, and that's the frame. But it came from a totally different world. We haven't
yeah.
come to terms with that, right? And I don't know that we ever will. But
Well, luckily you said that because that's going to be the next step of some of my videos as well. Is I'm going to start grabbing because I have a lot of literature that I've gone through, and it's hard to put those literature. But I made a poll, and there was a few people that agreed. So I'm going to be putting up some of the literature and sociology that are associated with some of these big buzzwords, right? Some of the big pieces, not going back to like the philosophical standards associated with it because I kind of already did that in a broad sense, but like looking at the academic literature and really opening up, like what is standpoint epistemology. Some people go to New Discourses with that guy, Dr. James Lindsay. He does an all right way about going it, but he's mostly trying to attack the philosophical underpinnings, whereas I think it's probably way more important to actually look at what is the literature that's driving public policy. What is the literature that's driving these people? What do they mean? What are they saying? Is it the same as, the everyman on the street or the ever protester out there? Because there is a big gulf there, but we need to be able to identify it. We need to know what it
Yeah.
says. And then another thing, sorry, I hate to cut you off, is
Okay.
you were talking about like these infections from academia, right? There's a big one that I'm really into, and I'm making a lot of work on it, is dissociative identity disorder, ADHD,
Mhm.
anxiety. I don't know if you've seen this on TikTok. There's a huge problem with with the alpha generation right now, where they literally have like 20% of people, or 20% of young girls have like Tourette's or ADHD. It's just like, no, you don't. But they're being narratively driven into this stuff.
Yeah.
And like DID, like that's an unbelievably difficult and hard to pin down and hard to understand mental disorder that these people have zero clue. They're like switching on camera and stuff like that. I have a background in DID for several reasons in real world contexts, and I can tell you, when I watch these videos, it makes me shake with anger. But it's like dominating discourses on like TikTok and stuff, and it's just like, what do we do? What do we do, man? When the role of an individual is being overtaken by something that's not just unreal or isomorphic in that, but it's totally unreal, and it's against them, against their nature and their essence, and they're just mind controlled to some extent, because I don't know a better way to put it.
Yeah, there's a weird dichotomy that goes on, which is like, you kind of want to explain to people all the details, right, of a subject matter. I mean, people like us, we're very curious people, right? And we see something, and we're like, I'm going to read more about it. I gotta learn all this stuff so I can really understand it, right? A lot of people don't want to do that. They want kind of a quick, easy answer, and they're a lot of times going to get a quick, easy, wrong answer, and you want them to get the quick, easy, right answer, but maybe there isn't a quick, easy, right answer, right? But you want them to like expand. So, how do you teach somebody something rich and complicated without having to take too much of their time and making it entertaining so they'll pay attention? Very hard, right? Very hard problem. And I don't know enough about the mental health world. I find it fascinating and I read about it. I find it interesting because they put out all these ADHD quiz. I meet a lot of these like neurodivergent standards, but I don't feel neurodivergent in the sense that I have difficulties. Like I
Yeah.
manage life really well. I just have a lot of the same kind of attitudes.
Yeah.
And I look at some of them and I'm like, man, if this is neurodivergent, what's neurotypical? Because I don't know if I know anybody who fits like is so mentally, they're like, oh, I didn't understand the social cues, therefore like I have this disability. I'm like, nobody understands all the social cues, right? Like we misunderstand each other all the time as human beings. That's the normal state of affairs, right?
Right.
Anybody who gets every social cue everybody makes is some kind of savant god, right? I don't think that exists. So I do find some of those a little strange, and I don't want to like attack people because a lot of the people who are talking about it are kind of delicate, and I don't want to hurt their feelings, right? But yeah, I do kind of want to say like, I don't know, that sounds really normal to me, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the big problem. I mean, there's also discussion in, after the whole reproduction scandal in psychology, right? They were like, well, if we're having all this trouble with reproduction, like, what's going on with the DSM-5? And they're like, oh, well, and then they're like, okay, well, the DSM-5 went from the DSM-1, which was like that, to the DSM-5, which is like that. And it's like, you can read the DSM-5 and it's like, you're pathologizing normal behavior often. And that's where it gets tripped up, because someone will read the DSM-5 and they'll get tripped up because they're like, well, this is like totally normal behavior that I exhibit. Like,
Yeah.
ADHD. Some people, everybody has problems with their executive function. Everybody has problems with their dopamine, especially
Yes.
in modern day when you can swipe and you're just getting a dopamine smack in the face. Like, yeah, you're going to struggle with regulating dopamine production. You're going to struggle with your executive function. That has nothing to do with having ADHD. That's a function of a neurochemical issue. Depression, no longer a neurochemical imbalance. So being depressed is just big sad now, right? So there's all
Yeah.
of these problems where we're just pathologizing normal behavior and people don't know how to interact and people don't know how to act on it. And it's
Yeah.
absolutely wrecking younger portions of society. I probably shouldn't say that with such strengthen my words, but I feel, I feel on
Yeah.
the inside that people are becoming associated with a role that's not theirs to play, that they just don't know. They're lost. They have no direction, no meaning, and they're just there, man.
Yeah, I think there's one advantage of it, right, that I see is again, I think self-awareness is super important for kind of well-being, right? To know what's going on with you. And so the hyper analysis of the difficulties that we have as people, like executive function, we have this term to describe it now, right? The why is it that like I know I need to go do the dishes, but I won't get out of bed to do it, right? What's going on with that? Right. I don't want that to be the case, right? But it's there. And as you say, everybody struggles with it, right? To some degree. But it's a question of whether like it really ruins your life or it's just an inconvenience or it keeps you from being Superman that you think you ought to be. But the fact that we're talking about it and we dissect it and we understand it and we're looking for ways to kind of deal with it and coping mechanisms, I think that's all great. But identifying ourselves as being, oh, like I have this problem that like makes me either like too weak or unable to deal with life or I don't know what it is like but really it's more just sort of a common struggle we all have. Some of us struggle with it more than others, right? So there's scale. So I like the analysis. I like the digging into our psychology to understand ourselves on little things we deal with every day. But I do feel like it gets to a point where we imagine that the normal is like the bodybuilder or the bikini babe, right? That's
Oh
just our
yeah.
problem as humans. We think, oh, that's normal, and if I'm not like that, I'm a loser.
Oh
Eh,
yeah.
like it's one of the problems we have to struggle with, and I think it's the same with mental health. We're getting that way to where like you can't put them on a magazine, but there's this mythical mental neurotypical super person, right? There is no person like that,
No.
right? Yeah,
No.
we're all just different degrees of fucked up in different directions, right?
100%. Look, if you think you have like some serious neurodivergence, please go sit in a math department around all the people doing real analysis as an undergrad, and you'll understand what neurodivergence is. When you're sitting there talking to them or you're having a conversation and they're just like looking down and they're like not even acknowledging in you, and they're just look up and they're okay, you'll know what I'm talking. If you've ever sat in a so my undergrad was math and econ, and so I had to hang out with all the math people. And I'm an extrovert. I like people. I'm boisterous. That ain't it in a math department, chief. That is very
No.
awkward. No. Okay, so this is the last bit. I'm probably only going to hold you for about 8 to 10 more minutes, and I do
Okay.
want to get a little bit of understanding. So can you tell me about the game? Because I'm interested in that as well.
Oh, my game?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So Everyday Heroes. So if people don't know, role playing games, since we're talking about roles, that will tie it in. Just a game. It's a storytelling game where there's a dungeon master who tells a story. And then the players play characters in the story and they get to decide what they want to do. So the most popular game is Dungeons and Dragons, and that's about being princes and wizards and warriors and medieval warriors and stuff, fighting monsters and magic and evil. And so my game's called Everyday Heroes. It's a similar kind of a game, but it's about like action cinema. So Die Hard, Rambo, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Right now, I'm working on Highlander. So we have licensed properties. Got like 8 of those. Right now, you can go get Escape from New York, which is about Escape from New York, the John Carpenter film. And then my design partner Gooper has got one called for The Crow. So if you like The Crow and a little gothic action, um,
Mm.
So lots of guns and lots of crazy capers and things. That's what the game's about. The core game called Everyday Heroes is set in like the modern world. So it's just our world, but a little bit more Hollywood version, right? Because you're going to get up to those kind of Hollywood stories. And the heroes that you're going to make are a little larger than life. They're not everyday heroes. Just sounds really cool, but yeah, you're a little bit special, right?
We're all a little special. Come on now.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just kind of fun action cinema. Lots of different heroes. If you're into role playing games, I think you'll like it. It's a D20 game, so it's the same rules system, more or less, as Dungeons and Dragons. There's a big controversy about that right now, by the way, but
I was going to
uh,
ask that, but go on.
yeah. So not too similar though. Wizards of the Coast, not too similar. But yeah, no. If you know how to play Dungeons and Dragons, you can figure out everyday heroes pretty quickly. So it's easy to pick up, and it's just got kind of a friendly, light tone on it. Yeah, so far the reviews have been great. Like pretty much everybody who's reviewed it says it's awesome. I hope it is. I want to
I
see if it is or not, but
I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be bomb because especially talking about that Wizards of the Coast and acting stupid with D&D. Uh, I've played Magic for years. I
yeah,
mean, I don't know if anybody's ever seen any of some of my stuff. I've played Magic the Gathering Arena, doing some of my videos. I love Magic. I love role playing games. I was playing Diablo 2 when it first came out years and years ago. I was like high ranked. I was up there, man. I love role playing games, action and other styles. And Wizards of the Coast has done everything in their power to alienate and destroy their fan base as humanly possible.
yeah. Just the last year, they've been on a hell of a roll of making life. Yeah,
Was it like $1,000 for fake cards that you could buy for the 30th
yeah.
anniversary?
$1,000 to buy 4 booster packs of cards you cannot play in tournaments, illegal tournaments. I don't play Magic anymore, but I follow Magic because
Yeah,
I love the game. My traveling lifestyle does not permit me to play regular Magic anymore.
yeah,
So yeah, insane. Just a weird level of detachment from but it makes sense. It's a giant corporation now, and they've got giant corporate people that don't know shit about hobby games, and they get to call the shots. Right, the people at the top, not the people at the bottom who interact with the fans, make the decisions,
mm,
and yeah, they make bad decisions. Right, things were going great. Right, I mean, Magic was going awesome.
yeah,
And from what I understand, the card design and stuff, that's all really good. People are still making a good game, but the business decisions, strategic
yeah.
decisions, they're just printing too many cards. People can't buy them all. And they're like,
Oh yeah,
oh, yeah, well, I mean, they're like, well, yeah, but you don't have to buy everything. But that just says they don't understand hardcore Magic players, right?
right. And
You
and
know,
that
like,
that's so bad because like I'm one of those people. I will drop at some point in time if I really like. If I don't like the set, I won't buy it. I may buy like a
yeah,
booster pack here and there, but I'll just buy singles of cards that I need if I was actually going to go do a competition or something. And the last thing I bought in any serious amount was I bought the Warhammer 40K because Warhammer 40K is also my other place that I like to land.
yep,
And so when that happened, I was like, oh, this is cool. This is
yeah.
so cool. I'm about this. And it was $70 for just a normal pack. And
Oh, jeez, it's
I
crazy.
was like, all right, cool. Well, that was my birthday present. And then it was like, well, we're going up $2 on booster packs. All right. Well, we're working on it. And then it was like five things came back to back to back. And it was like, I don't have enough money to buy all of it, even if I wanted to. And so now this one thing, the Dungeons and Dragons set, I was like, oh, I really want some of that. I really like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't like the card design, or I don't like the game design associated with it, like going in the dungeon. I thought that was stupid, but I like the cards. I could get the cards just to have them to look at.
Yeah, sure.
And then it was like another set came after that. I was like, well, I can't get that because this drops in a month and that looks really cool. Then it was like, this drops. Oh man, I got to save up for this. It's like, by the end of it, I didn't buy anything
Yeah, they
because,
just break you, right?
yeah,
It's like, well, fuck it. If I can't,
exactly.
yeah, if I can't be part of the cool kids club, I don't want to be part of the club. I'll go join
Exactly.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. That bothered me. But I hope everybody, goes and checks it out. Would you please, put everything down in a comment. I'll pin it that way people can go and check it out because I do think it's really cool. I do like Dungeons and Dragons, uh, and I could see it taking on like a more modern spec idea. I think that's really cool because
Yeah,
I've
it's
always
hella
been
fun. I mean,
okay, I'm a ranger, but I don't want a bow. Can I have like an M107?
yeah,
We're
yeah, in
gonna
our game you can.
okay.
You get
There we
yourself an
go.
M2, you go to town.
Yeah, so I'm about that life. So you throw that comment down there below. I'm gonna pin it, and I'm probably gonna check it out myself because since Wizard of the Coast has done that, I didn't buy any of the new D&D stuff, and so I can definitely roll with that.
Yeah, I don't know why they're shooting themselves in the foot. It's driving us all crazy. But yeah, Everyday Heroes is not going away. We've got to kind of adjust our strategy a little bit, but we are going to keep making cool games. That's my mission. So
That's awesome, and thank you so much. And like I said, I'm gonna get off of here. I'm gonna try to hit you up in a few weeks. Try to do this again. I really enjoyed
sure.
conversating with you. You've been my guest that's come back more than once. So,
Oh yeah, anytime, man.
all right, you have a good one. God
All right,
bless you.
take care. All.